I'm going to let Carrie talk to us about when we get our standards to the point where we've gone through internal review, we've gone through the Federal Register, and we're getting to the point in time where we're ready for national release. We're going to circle back, and I'm going to show you how to create a couple other documents after Carrie, the short summary, the long summary, and how to do the network diagram. But those are pretty short. And I wanted to take advantage of Carrie while we have him. And I know Carrie's not feeling well, so I don't want to keep him on for too long, any longer than necessary. All right, Carrie, so I need to stop sharing, and I am going to make you presenter.
All right, thanks, Bill. I'm really sorry I can't be there. I wished I was able to be there. I didn't sleep at all last night, and after all is said and done, I decided that you probably didn't want to get this cold that I have and congestion and everything else going along with it. So, okay, real quick, I wanted to show you just one more thing about some of the other documents. And talk a moment about statement of work. And you notice I have a statement of work here, and you notice that there are times when we highlight things in red. So I wanted to just take you in and show you really quick how you do that highlighting. So I'm going to check this document out. And then you'll see the highlighting here. So to highlight, what you do is flag all of the text, and if you can come up here, this will not say state tag, it will say normal. So you would highlight it, highlight the text, come up above where it says normal, and then you'll see the red state tag down here. So once you click on that, it turns that red identifying to the state that they have something that needs to be added to the document.
Could you roll your screen down a little bit? You went off the screen with your cursor, at least what I'm seeing.
Top or bottom?
You went off the top.
I went off the top.
Pull your screen down. Yeah.
Right there?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so once you've done that, just hit save and close. And you know the routine here in terms of routing. Once, I think you may have talked about draft and final on the other documents. It's more important at the state level than it is the national level, because these documents are, at the state level, they're sent to the field office tech guide anytime they're marked as final. So if anybody goes in from the state level and they send a document to the NRT and it's marked final, it'll get sent, even whether they wanted it to be sent or not. So don't mark these documents final until they really are final. Okay. So back, I want to just briefly walk through this again. And so this, what's happening, the process that we're going to do right now, we're working in CPDES. And in relation to what's happening with the National Conservation Practice Standard, the process that we're going to do is we have the standards setting at the status of awaiting CPDES updates. And we're going to hit a button or two, and it's going to send data from that document into CPDES, where it's then written to the NRT, and then we're going to take you into CPDES and do some processing of that data. So that's the step that...
Can you go back a slide and just show us that where we are in the cycle of the standard workflow?
This one? So we would have gone, your document should have gone through Federal Register posting. You've gotten comments back. You've addressed those comments. It's gone to the QAT. And they've given you comments back, and you've corrected all those comments. The standard is pretty much at this point in time should be ready to go. So we are now at this stage awaiting CPDES updates.
Every time you change the box, you change the status, and you save. It's a different status. And sometimes each one's done by different people.
So they'd be using the second green button that an NDL sees. Update CPDES shortly.
Yes. Yep.
Does that transfer the metadata, excluding the standard effective date, to CPDES? You can show it on screen, maybe, since you're there.
I will do that. Okay, so you can see right here, I have been into this document. I'll go ahead and open it, but you see the status says awaiting CPDES updates. So I had been in and processed that document and you're doing this as the MDL. So this is an action that the MDL does. And what we're going to do as we send this data, we're going to send the practice code, we're going to send the practice name, we're going to send some information, dating information about the date that the practice standard is updated or becoming available. We're sending the definition to CPDES. And probably the most important thing is that we are sending these bullets, these bulleted purpose statements, we are sending to CPDES. The rest of this information below, we are not sending any of that information. So it's just this top information that's being sent to CPDES. So if you were finishing that document, it would have been QAT complete, and I would set the status to awaiting CPDES updates. You can route it to yourself, or you can route it to no one, whichever you would prefer. And what happens in this stage, you will get, once you set this, you're going to get an email from the system telling you that you have some actions that need to be taken in CPDES. So we've got the standard where we need it. We're now going to go down to the bottom, and you can see the bottom of my screen, hopefully. Is everybody seeing where I'm at under CPS management?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're just demoing this. Where I am in the pre-production, the training site, not the actual site, and I know you guys are working in the actual site and probably don't have documents that you can or need to send at this point in time. So again, you've seen this page. There's only two buttons that you have as NDLs. We've set our document at awaiting CPDES updates. So we're now going to click on the update CPDES. And it's going to ask, pop up a box. It has a checkbox here that's automatically checked because this process occurs more often at the state level than it does for you. So you need to take that check off because this is not a state transfer, and so we don't want to select the state. Then you enter the practice code, and it was 484 mulching that we're sending, and we simply send the data. As you send that, you'll see something pop up, and if it's been sent successfully, you'll get a message that tells you that you've successfully updated CPDES with data from standard 484 CPS mulching 2017. Click OK to that, and I have now finished with all of my actions, and you'll see immediately down here, this is the email that was sent to me. It tells me, Carrie, this email acts as a reminder that you processed metadata. It's been successfully transferred to CPDES, and go in and perform your duties as a data steward before continuing in court. So I get that reminder email. Okay, so let's go into CPDES then. And I do want you, all of you, to go into CPDES with me. You're going to be in the production site I'm going to be in the training site. So you won't be taking any actions along with me, but I do want you to, go into the system and kind of take a look around with me. I don't know if you talked about this today, but there is the old Smart Tech website is a great place where you can go and you can get access to the Field Office Tech Guide. You can access the CPD DMS system. You can access CPDES. For those of you that do payment schedules, you can access payment schedules and also the average annual costs. You'll notice here that there is a link that's missing. There used to be a link here that said CPPE. That link is no longer there because, as you see from this note here, it says that CPPE has been moved internal into CPDES. So with that, I would want to make sure that you have, and if you would go ahead, if you don't have a bookmark to CPDES, type this in, this address to SmartTech, https://smarttech.sc.egov.usda.gov.
And then bookmark it.
And then bookmark it. Yep. Once you're there, then I want you to go ahead and log into CPDES. So am I good to continue there, Matt or Bill?
Looks like people are at CPDES, and I don't know, you might want to show them the login because it's not obvious on the screen.
Yep, yep, we will go there. So again, go ahead and click on that. And everybody and their dog has access to this website. So what you see when it first opens up is you see a public website where the public, partners, TSPs, anybody can go into this and they can take a look at the practices that are active nationally and the practices that are active in Hawaii. So if you wanted to go to Hawaii and look at their list and see which practices are active, you could go in and look at this. And you'll notice the information you get here is the practice code. You'll also notice that we've got CSP and bundle information, and CAP information is here in addition to the practice standards. You've got the practice, the definition, the shape. This is a new one that we just added into this. You've got the units, the effective date of the practice standard, and the lifespan. So here's another place now, besides NHCP, this is another place where you can find lifespan. While I'm here on this page, a couple of things I wanted to note is you'll notice that every one of these, if you highlight or hover over the top of code or practice or definition, this allows you to sort by those. So if you click on it once, it sorts from A to Z. If you click on it a second time, it sorts from Z to A. And you can do that with the effective date if you want to find the oldest date or you find the newest date. So any one of these up here you can filter, and throughout the system in the other menus that you're in, you're also able to do that. Another thing that you can do for export whatever it is you're viewing on the screen. So you can export this it comes in a CSV format when you export it, and then you can pull it into Microsoft Excel and do other things that you may want to do with it. Other thing that you may want to note is the pagination over here. You can go to the first page, you can go back a page, you can actually type in a page. If you wanted to go to page 6, you would type that in, click outside, it would take you to page 6. You can go forward a page, or you can go to the very end. The other thing that you can do here is actually set how many rows are visible. Right now it defaults to 50. So if you wanted to view 200, rows, you could type in 200 and it would show you 200 rows. Probably shouldn't have done that. It's going slow. Okay. All right. So we're not actually in the system yet. Let's look at the top right here. And you'll notice the question mark. This is where you would click on this if you have a problem and you need to send an email message to the help desk. Well, excuse me. I'm sorry. That's the Contact Us button. The Help button should take you to the CPDES user guide. And it will allow you to download that user guide. So just like with BMS has a user guide, this is where you get the user guide to CPDES. And it walks you through the screens and every aspect, and it talks about the different roles, what all of the other roles do, and so that's a good resource to go to. All right, so next we're going to log into the system, so I want all of you to go ahead and do that, and if we have given you all the proper permissions, this is where we're going to make it or break it. You're going to see the next screen or not. So go ahead and click on Log In. For you, it should be, if you're in Internet Explorer, it will automatically oh gosh, got a problem there. It should automatically log you in through your link pass. I have to go through just a different process here because I am going into the production system. So give me a moment.
This is Chuck. I have unauthorized access.
Check that. That means that we have not given you appropriate permissions. So, Matt, if you wouldn't mind going into Z roles and giving him permissions.
Bear with me. You want to pause and ask questions? Buy me some time.
He'll let you know, Chuck, when you're...
I'll ask a question.
Okay.
The effective date that's on this list, how was that determined? Because we have stuff from 1997 all the way up to November of 2018.
That is a good question, and the answer to that is a to answer. That has changed. That effective date has changed. Originally, when this was programmed, that was the date that the practice standard was first used, the very first time that it was ever used. And since we have now reprogrammed the system, it should be displaying the last time that practice standard was updated in the system. So that's why you are seeing some 2018s and you're seeing some some way earlier ones, is because no actions have been taken onto it. And some of them may be clear back to the first time that practice was used. Oh, are we about good to go, Matt?
Yeah, Chuck, yours should be ready to retry logging in now. I gave you permission to CPDES National Practice Data Steward.
It worked.
Great. Now if I can get it to work. I know why it's not working. It's because I went into the production site instead of the training site. Okay, so in this case, I'm logged in under the pseudonym of Glenn Carpenter, and you'll see the screens that I have here. These are the actual modules that I have. So CPD management, we'll go there in a second. We would click on here. PPE matrix and make changes there. And if we want to look at individual practices and change narratives and create national narratives, you would go in here. Once you click into these things, then you'll notice here at the bottom there are different actions that can be taken, and these will be highlighted when you can take an action. Okay, so there's purpose management and being able to view a practice. So the first thing that we want to do is click on CPD management, and what this is it's a screen that simply helps us identify to make sure that the transaction occurred, that the document truly did, and the information got sent, not the document, but the information from the document truly got sent to CPDES. You'll notice here again that this list is growing. We didn't have the money to put a routine in to delete this list, so it's ever growing. So if you want to easily find the last transaction, you can click here on transaction date and find the last transaction that occurred. And so you'll notice that we just barely sent 484 to the system. We sent that at 19:58 p.m. The name of the practice standard was mulching. And as I click on that, you'll notice then that the information that was transferred is now displayed. So I can see the practice code, the name, the lifespan, the practice unit, the definition of the practice, and I come down here and I can see all the purpose statements. Okay, there's no actions that I can take here, but I can just view the data and verify that the data truly did come into the system. Okay, so the next thing that I need to do, we're going to click on practices, and if you want to follow me, it's okay to go ahead and do this. You can.
I'm
Yes,
getting
Chuck.
different. I didn't come up with those same. Did the rest of the group come up with the same ones that you had?
No, you will not get what I have because I'm in the training site. You're in the production site.
Okay, thank you.
So you're going to have to interpret what I say and change it for what you're seeing on the screen. So again, here the way I like to do this is I typically click on the code, and we want to find 484. So it's probably not 50 lines down. So I'll go into the next page until I find 484. Getting close. So it's on page 3. So once I get there, you'll see nothing over here in the actions. I'm not able to take an action yet because I haven't clicked on the practice standard. So what you do is highlight the practice standard, and so you can go ahead and pick one that's there just so you can view what's happening. So I click on mulching, and now I'm going to go to purpose management. And I obviously deceived you because I thought this highlighted, but it doesn't. I'm going into purpose management, and you'll now see a list of each one of the purpose statements that came across. And you'll see down here, purpose resource concerns in all categories. And it appears that I can't do anything. So again, in this system, before you do anything, you have to make a selection. So I'm going to select improve plant productivity and health, and you'll notice that immediately some things pop up on the screen. One of the first things that you'll see a purpose start date, and you'll notice that the start date is almost a year from now. So the system is set up so that all purposes won't start until the beginning of a new year. So when you're making changes in the system to a practice standard, those purpose statements will become effective October 1st. However, you can override the system. And as we go through the process of getting all of your practices initially into the system, what we need you to do is to go ahead and change that date to today's date. So we're going to go in, and when you do that, it won't let you select anything before today's date. You can select today's date or beyond. So I've selected this date. It's applicable only to this purpose statement. Now I go down looking at the purpose statement, improve plant productivity and health, and this is where I'm going to create my association. So I'm going to find the purpose that that statement is associated with, and it's undesirable plant productivity and health. Once you have done that, now it's highlighted over here, and you'll see that you need to save that practice purpose. Now notice up on top here that it gave you a message that was saving the record, and then it has a green check that identifies the record was saved. If there's some kind of a problem, you'll see a red X here that will indicate that there was a problem with saving the information. So once you've done that for one purpose statement, you then follow that same process for each one of the purpose statements individually. So I'd click on the second, set my start date, go down, and it was efficiency of moisture management. I would find the applicable purpose statement to that. If you're like me and this list confuses you and I say, oh my gosh, I can't figure that out, I can go to the categories so that it reduces what I see down there, and I'm going to look at insufficient water. Now I'm seeing only the two that are in that category of inefficient water. So now I can select this one, and I can go ahead and save that purpose. Again, you'll notice that these are not being removed as you continue saving them. It gives you these messages, and if you save too many of those, you get to the bottom of the screen and you can't see the whole screen. So you may want to come over and hit the X on these, and it will delete those messages. Then the last thing I wanted to mention is that, so if this purpose statement is such that there may be multiple resource concerns that it's associated with, and we discussed that yesterday, that a purpose statement correctly written shouldn't relate to an extreme large number of resource concerns. It should relate to one or two, maybe three.
Yeah, that's true for the agronomic, maybe, but not necessarily for waste management.
Yes, understand. So if there's more than one, you simply select all of those that are appropriate to be selected. And then once you've made that selection, then you go ahead and hit save. So you can highlight more than one down here. Okay, with that, I've kind of given you what you need to do here. Are there any questions that you have?
Well, this is Chuck. I'm a little confused. What are we actually doing with this? I mean, I see we're selecting but where does this show up and how to writing the standard? Are you only selecting things that will show up in the standard?
These purpose statements up here came from the standard, okay? Remember, we sent this mulching practice standard. We sent it from DMS to DES, and these purpose statements were sent. Now what we are doing is taking the purpose statement and associating it with a resource concern. So the next question you ask is, so what? And maybe this is the question you're really asking, Chuck, is what are we going to do with these associations, right?
That's what
you're really asking, right? So we see a couple of uses for these in the future. So as of this moment, there is no way to use this data, but the expectation is that we're going to be programming in Conservation Desktop a couple of routines. So one of these routines is that Conservation Desktop will be able to pull in these practice purposes when the planner selects practice standard and they're in the process of developing implementation requirements. These specific purpose statements will come up and the planner will be able to select and say, I am installing this practice for, and then select whichever one of these resource or excuse me, whichever one of these purposes the practice is being planned for. So that's one potential use of the system in the future. Another potential use is to help the planner in terms of the planning process, and when they are then, they have selected in planning a resource concern for sheet and rill erosion. So all of this information is going to be in a table in the background. When they select that they've got a sheet and rill erosion resource concern, then the conservation desktop would search the database and it would pull up all of the practice standards that have a listed association to sheet and rill erosion. So it'll help them in planning in terms of being able to correctly identify practices that can be planned to solve a resource concern. Does that answer your question, Chuck?
Yes, it does. Thanks. It makes sense now.
Okay.
I thought we were doing something that was changing the standard, and I thought I didn't quite follow. So, no, it makes sense.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and I'm going to ask a question, and it's kind of a side item. If we were going to be changing our resource concerns in the future, does CPDES have a way to change our list?
Excuse me. Yes, we built in a routine where we can modify the resource concerns, but because we have flip-flopped back and forth so much on how we're going to name them and kind of the conventions we're using to name them, the system didn't get programmed adequately. So we are working on getting some money to finalize that process. And currently, Bill, you're the one who manages that. We will probably move that over to a different person in terms of managing resource concerns. But we are building capability in the system to be able to change, modify, add practice purposes in the future. I'm sorry, not practice purposes. The medicine is worn off, but my brain hasn't got up. Excuse me. Anyway, yes, we will be able to manage resource concerns in the system.
I don't quite follow why you would have a start date in the future and why you have a proposed end date. Are you saying after a year this would no longer be a resource concern? Why do you have those dates in there in the calendar that you proposed? And how do you know when?
So first of all, the purpose start date, remember in the system, the field staff are going to be using as we update standards, okay? So this is all related to updating of standards. So who's to say that today this list 5 years from now very likely could change? It may not change at all, but it very likely could change. We could add a new resource concern into the system, and so we'd have to flag a new resource concern, or we might get rid of one that's deleted, and we'll need to put an end date on that purpose statement because it's no longer going to be used in the system. So that's the reason that we have that, is because over time these purpose statements may change.
So I'm going to say that a little different way. So let's say we're creating a standard, and the standard's got a new purpose in it. We've added a purpose as a part of our standard revision. Now, when we go to release the standard, let's say we release the standard in May. Well, our discipline leads, are going to be in this database before May release, so they can go in and set it up, and they would then put a future date for when that purpose becomes active. Now, a lot of times what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making our national standards, the changes become effective October 1. So if we made a change in May to a national standard, we may release it, put it out, but then there'll be a note there that says this becomes effective October 1. So in this database, we'd want to put in there that this new purpose becomes effective October 1.
Is that because of payment schedule?
It's programmatically, yes. I mean, it's
various.
yeah, it's contracting.
And then do states have a year from then to adopt
And
it?
then states have a year from then to adopt it, yes.
Yes. Now, when the states, let's talk about the states for a moment, and thank you for that addition, Bill. That was great. I appreciate that. Remember that states are not going to be adopting the national immediately, so we're putting you as NDLs are putting these dates in of when the national practice standard is going to be released. When state staff come in then and they update the practice standards, their database table is a completely different database table, but what their routine is, it shows them what the national associations are, and they can choose to wholesale adopt the national associations, or they can also make changes based on any state criteria, and if they've added a purpose at the state level, they would be able to make the association, or if they've deleted a purpose, they can make those things happen in the system as well. So, and when the states adopt it, they will set a purpose statement date that's different than what nationally has been set, because those tables are separate from the national data tables. All right, one last call for any questions here. The next thing I want to do then is go real quickly into practices, and we're going to look again at 484. This routine is not built to allow you to change a narrative, so never mind.
Yeah, we made the decision that all narratives are the definition.
That's correct. We did do that. Okay, so I'm going to take you into CPPE. This one is not near as fun to deal with. But so as a discipline specialist, you do have a responsibility for the values, the CPPE values, and typically the process has been that you, in about January or so, you get an email from Hal Gordon and he says, go through my spreadsheet and make any changes that you want to make, and you go ahead and make those changes in the spreadsheet, send it back to Hal. Hal puts together the complete database, and then he sends it to Fort Collins where they script the information for the upcoming fiscal year. This process allows you as data stewards to make those changes without going through that process, and hopefully we'll get money to improve this, or we're kind of having some discussions of whether or not program folks will even continue to use the CPPE matrix or not, and whether this will still be in the system. But for now, it's still in the system, and you would still be taking action on it. So you're going to first of all select national, because that's the tables that we're working on. Once you've selected national, you'll notice that you can then select a resource concern category. So hopefully you had already had a copy of this data and you know which values you want to change, so it's not expected that you're going to change every value. You may just change one or two values, so you can select, I need to go in and change a value in insufficient water. So once I have selected those two things, I'm going to hit go, and it's going to bring up the national practices. Beforehand, I should have showed you, notice this action over here of export all CPPE data. So if you wanted to go ahead and get previous to doing this action, if you want to get a printout of all of the national CPPE values, you can export those into a CSV file. And if you wanted to get state values for a specific state, you could select the state. Once you've clicked on go, you can export all the CPPE data for a state as well. Okay, so let's hit go. Notice then again the list of practices and the codes come up. This time practices first instead of code. Notice you can filter over here if you want to get rid of all those CSP things and just click on practices. It will display only the practices. I'm going to click on code because I'm trying to find 484. Once I find 484, I'm going to click on 484, and then I click on Edit the Row, and it brings up a box that gives me the two resource concerns associated with inefficient water. And I can now make that change to whatever value I want it to be, hit save. Then I would go to, if I wanted to change another value, let's say soil erosion values, I need to go through that process again. Select soil erosion, hit the go button, select my practice, edit the row. So I've selected mulching, and you can see here it displays for this resource concern category. The matrix here displays all of the values for that resource concern category. Hit edit the row, and then I can make any changes that I want to make here. Once I've made the changes that I want to make, I hit save. And if it saves correctly, I get a green check mark up here. And in this case, something went wrong. It's probably the system not talking to each other, but it gave me an error. And I can't explain why the error, but okay. With that, I'm going to call for any questions. Excuse me. Call for any questions that you have.
Right now, Carrie, current CPPE from last year is in the system, right?
That is correct. Yep, the 2019 values are there. States have adopted all of those values, and they're incorporated into the payment schedules. They're incorporated into the ranking tools. And so if you ever have the chance in states, this is where states create a problem, not because the system was designed bad, but because the program folks decided to use the system different than what it was designed for. So the system allows, at the state level and the national, allows values to be changed any time of the year. But if you change those values, if the states change those values in mid-year, because they've captured that data and taken it outside of the system, now what happens is it breaks all of their ranking scores if they go in and try to change a value in mid-year. So we have to tell states on a regular basis, please don't do that. That's why you're having a problem, is because you changed those values and you broke the rankings. And so you have to go back and redo every single ranking that was made prior to that time. Other questions? So with that, you have now completed all the tasks that you need to complete in CPDES. And you can go ahead and log out of the system, and we're good to go. So Bill, with that, if there's no other discussion, I'll turn it back to you.
So do they need to move it forward, go back to the original document?
Hopefully none of you made any changes in the system because you were working in the production system. Oh, okay, now I get what you're saying. I'm sorry. So now once you have done that, now we come back into our workspace and we're able to move this forward now. So we're going to check it out. We've done what we need to do. I don't recall though, Bill, if this is an NDL function or not. I believe it is, right? An NDL function.
Yeah.
Okay. So as the NDL, then you would come in and change the status to ready for national release. And do you have a preference, Bill, if they send it directly to you or send it to the administrators or route to no one?
They can send it to the administrator.
So you can go ahead and send that to the administrator. So select that. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go ahead and select no one. So you don't. This is now where you set a standard effective date. And in this process,
Actually, they
what
wouldn't,
you want.
they wouldn't do that.
They would. There's one case where they do that, and they're going to do that a lot, Bill, and that is where we're trying to get all of the current information in there.
Yeah, okay.
What you want to do is go ahead and set this standard effective date and find the date that this standard really was released. And I believe this one was 2017, October 2017 is when it was released. So I'm going to set that standard effective date of when this standard was actually released in 2017. Otherwise, when you're doing upgrades, your 5-year maintenance upgrades to the practice standards, do not enter an effective date here. Do this process only as we're putting in all the data the first time. Does that make sense then?
As a standard effective date, you don't know that if it's a new one that's coming out until I, as the ADM, say, okay, it's going out in January. And then I have a button that I can make all the ones that are fixing to go out in an NHCP notice, give them all the same date.
So another thing that needs to happen at this point in time is that you are verifying that all of the other documents that need to be completed are completed. So you would be selecting all of these, come in and check, yes, I've got my long summary done, yes, I've got my short summary done, the practice overview is ready, statement of work is ready, the CPPE is done, I've got my network effects diagram. Some of these you have an option to select not required. So in many of your engineering practices, you won't have an implementation requirement document, and you may select, well, that's not required for this particular practice standard. Make sure that you set the language code. And then in terms of keywords, please note that these keywords are transferred in the system so that state folks are able to see those keywords. So when they're adopting the national standard, they will get all of the keywords that were entered nationally. If you enter no keywords, then they don't get those. The value of these keywords, the benefit to the field staff is that these then are transferred also into the field office technical guide so that when people are doing searches in the field office tech guide by any of these words, they're able to find things based on the keywords that were sent.
And just as a note, the name of the standard is automatically included as keywords. So you don't need to add that back in.
Correct. So I'm going to save that, and you will notice then that the status is now changed to ready for national release. And then it's routed to the next person for the next action that needs to be taken.
Only the discipline lead can do that.
So with that, Bill, I think I turn it back over to you.
One question, Terry?
Yes.
You said that the NDL is going to go into CPDES and do all that resource concern work. And and it could just happen. We get back out and move on. We finish the standard or whatever. We're just waiting around, and at some point that standard is going to get released in an NHCP notice. Is it at that time that all that work we did in CPPE or in CPDES occurs? I mean, can we do that any time before it gets released, once we say it's ready to release? Or does it have to be in short time frame to when it actually is going to be released?
That's part of the discussion we had on those start dates, the purpose start dates. That's where you put when you think the practice standard is going to be released. So it allows you, the intent that we built it into the system, the intent is that you create those associations at this stage of the game so that you don't forget. If for some reason you did forget, or something changed, or you needed to send them again because a purpose statement was incorrect, or you can go back in later in the system and change those associations if needed. So the system is pretty open and flexible that if you didn't make them at that exact time, you can go back in and change them. But what is not flexible is that's the only place in the system where the purpose statements are sent to CPDES. So if you do not, as a minimum, push the button and send them to CPDES and the standard goes to released, it's a fairly complicated process to have to back the standard up and get it back to awaiting CPDES updates where you can send those purpose statements to DES. So you do have to do that step. No matter what, you've got to do that step of sending the purpose statements. The associations, if need be, can be done a little bit later. But you want to make sure they are done prior to the release of the actual standard.